We will bring you more news on that as tributes continue to pour in. Let's tell you about this now. Israel, its military, having recovered the bodies of 2 Israelis killed on October the 7th in 2023. So we'll tell you about that in just a moment. Let's take a quick break.
Parlez-vous couramment le français? Êtes-vous passionné par la radio? Et êtes-vous qualifié pour travailler en Afrique du Sud? Envoyez-nous votre CV et vos 3 minutes démo en MP3 à @channelafrica.co.za pour avoir une chance de rejoindre la famille Channel Africa. Si vous n'avez pas de réponse après 14 jours, cela signifie que vous n'avez pas été retenu. Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on African World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
Es-tu préoccupé par quelque chose? Es-tu passionné par les questions qui comptent? As-tu une voix qui mérite d'être entendue? Eh bien, nous avons la plateforme parfaite pour toi. Téléphone-nous ou fais-nous un WhatsApp au +27 66 408 87 42 et nous te rappellerons. Sois dans la conversation.
Salut Channel Africa, ici Beno le Diamant Rouge et Binal Sport depuis le Cameroun, le pays des Lions. Voilà.
Sois dans la conversation. Il ne s'agit pas seulement de parler, mais c'est ta chance d'exprimer ton point de vue, de partager tes opinions et de t'engager avec une communauté qui valorise ton avis. Suivez-nous sur les réseaux sociaux, visitez notre site www.channelafrica.co.za et préparez-vous à partager vos points de vue sur Channel Africa, la perspective africaine.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on African World Hour with Sipiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
5 minutes past 9. So we continue with that top story of today. Former Zambian President Edgar Lungu passing away earlier on today after a prolonged illness. Lungu served as the country's president from 2015 to 2021, and his tenure was marked by ambitious infrastructure projects, but also significant economic challenges. To reflect more on Edgar Lungu's legacy, we speak now to leader and president of the Socialist Party in Zambia, Fred Membe. A very good evening to you, Dr. Membe. Thank you so much for speaking to us.
Good evening. Thank you very much.
I see, Dr. Membe, that you've already put out messages of condolences, saying, in fact, that your deepest thoughts and sympathies are with Esther Lungu, the family and friends of Mr. Edgar Lungu. Just tell us a little bit more about your experience of him. You worked during his era in many different facets.
I've known His Excellency President Edgar Chagwa Lungu since 1978. So it's a period of almost 47 years. We were friends, we were brothers. He was there for me, I was there for him in those days. He was civic-minded throughout. He got into politics quite early with the UPND, which is the ruling party today, and left to join the Patriotic Front in its infancy. He has rose through the ranks in terms of government portfolios. He was a deputy minister. He became a minister, Home Affairs and Defense, and became president. So, and he's a lawyer. He's a senior lawyer who has worked in the corporate world and also in legal practice. So he's got a track record. He's not somebody who just dropped from the streets. He has a track record, the professional track record and the political track record.
So tell us about your early days. What characterized your relationship and what changed over the years? Because as you say, that you did obviously encounter political differences along the way.
Well, we were friends until 1914 when Mr. Sata died and there was succession. We differed from 2014 up to the time he left the office. We didn't have a good relationship. We were not talking to each other. We were not visiting each other. He was in government. He was doing his own thing. I was doing my own thing. But differences come and go. A relationship, that is built on good friendship, on honest and sincerity, endured for a long time. And also, he was not a person, who kept permanent grudges. So, when we first met after he left office, I told him we have to put the past behind us. Come to my funeral because you don't know how my people treat you. He said, you won't die, Mwana, and not just now. Then I said, we are not immortal. And he said, then I told him, even you, if you die today, I don't want you not to fail to come to your funeral because I don't know how your people receive me because we haven't been talking for 7 years or so. That was on the plane coming from Harare in October 2023. We were both coming from the inauguration of President Mnangagwa. And we have been communicating quietly since then. He has come to see me at the police station when I was arrested. I went to see his wife when she was arrested, Esther Lungu. He came back into politics after retirement. His main mission was to unite the opposition because he was unhappy with the way the governance of the country was going. He was also unhappy with the way he was being treated and the way his family was treated. He was a man who cared about his family. He was a man who cared about his political party and his colleagues in the Patriotic Front. And he also cared about the country. He was a great Pan-Africanist. He maintained extremely good relations with our neighboring countries. He had perfect relations with Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, Angola, DRC, Tanzania, Malawi, and South Africa, Swaziland, and Lesotho.
Now,
He enjoyed.
Dr. Membe, let's talk about your time as a member of the media fraternity, his time in politics, and as you say, there were differences of opinion, but you still describe him as a man of humility, of simplicity. There were times within his tenure that his presidency was marred by allegations of corruption. The fact that the youth wing of his party were also accused of harassment of the opposition, the very opposition that you say towards the end of his life he sought to unify. Talk to me about how you memorialized his legacy during your time as a media within the media profession as an editor.
Mr. Lungu, unknown to many people, he was also a journalist. He was a trained, qualified journalist. And he cared about journalism and press freedom. Whenever journalists were arrested, whenever journalists were harassed, including myself, he was always there at the police stations. He took a keen interest in what was happening in the media. In politics, people take different positions. If you have a multi-party political dispensation, a plural political system, people take different positions. And differing politically does not mean enmity or should not be equated to enmity. And our people sometimes fail to realize that being in a different political organization, a different political apparatus, pursuing a different political agenda does not mean enmity with those who are pursuing a different one from yours. Unfortunately, this happens quite often in our politics, not only in Zambia, but in most parts of Africa. And we fell into that trap. But even when we differed, we took different paths. There was a record that we
All right. Dr.
taken into account in whatever we did. And that's why there was continuously a desire to reconcile, a desire to come closer. For people who saw us when we came closer, they would never realize that actually there had been serious differences between me and President Lungu. But that's the past. Nothing remains permanent, especially if you started from a friendly position. Even those who start from a position of antagonism with each other do find a reconciliation. Some of our best friends today are people who have fought with, people who have run battles with. The only person you cannot reconcile with is a person who is not there, who has moved away from this life.
And Dr.
Every living human being is possible to reconcile if you have a desire, if you have some love in your heart for other fellow human beings, you can reconcile.
And Dr. Member, I'd like to end on that note. What you would like to say about former President Edgar Lungu and his legacy as a politician, as a lawyer, as you say, somebody who was in the financial sector, as a father, as a grandfather. How do you believe he ought to be remembered?
President Lungu loved his family. Even before he became president, when I was close to him, he was very affectionate to his family. He was loyal to his friends. He cultivated many friendly relationships with people. He had a high sense of humility. He was not a pompous person. He was not an arrogant human being. He expressed simplicity in many things, and this endeared him to many Zambians. Many Zambians will remember him for his simplicity, for his humility. They loved him for his simplicity. They loved him for his humility. Also, he showed closeness to his family. He showed closeness to his friends everywhere. He's not a person who changed his position with you, his relationship with you, now that he has become president. We used to call each other mwana mwana, whatever that meant, whatever that means. Even when he was president, even when he ceased to be president, we still called each other that way. He never made you feel he was your superior if you were his friend. He was a nice human being.
All right.
Of course, like any other human being, he had his weaknesses, he had his faults, like every one of us. But he had some significant portion of our population that loved him, that cherished him. And indeed, when an energetic people, when a forceful people, when a loving people, when a peaceful people cry, injustice trembles. And today, injustice is trembling in this country.
Okay.
Those who hated him don't know how to deal with these deaths today.
And we're going to, I'm afraid, have to leave it there, but we really do appreciate your time, your insights. Dr. Membe, Dr. Fred Membe is president of the Socialist Party in Zambia, and of course we'll continue reflecting on the tributes that continue to pour in.
Zilipendwa na Abedi Jean de la Croix.
Kwa nini wanamuziki wengi sana wa kizazi kipya hawafiki mbali pale wanapofanya muziki?
Ni kwa sababu kitu cha kwanza ambacho naweza nikaongelea nikagusia zaidi sana ni kusema kuwa wale wasanii wanapotoa ngoma yao ya kwanza ikiwa kama kahiti kidogo tu, wanaanza kutamba mitaani, wanaonekana kama wapo majuu zaidi sana.
Kuna wanamuziki wengine ambao wanakimbilia kwa waganga wa jadi. Hivi muziki na dawa vinaendana?
Kitu cha kwanza naweza nikasema ni kuwa muziki na dawa haviendani. Lakini muziki ni kipaji.
Kuna watu wengine wanashutumu wasanii wengine kwamba wanaroga.
Wanaroga, wale wasanii kama wanaroga ni kutokujiamini tu. Lakini kitu cha muhimu sana ni kipaji.
Zilipendwa kila Jumamosi kuanzia saa 12 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati hadi saa 1 kamili majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
And we continue reflecting on tributes pouring in for former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, whose death was announced earlier on, to speak a little bit more about his life's work, his legacy. We are joined now by Laxton Lungu, chairperson of the Gears Initiative Zambia Advisory Council, to reflect on the 6 years that Lungu was president from 2015 to 2021. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us, Mr. Lungu.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening to you as we mourn here in Zambia.
And condolences to you and the rest of Zambians. And of course, one would be tempted to ask this question first. Was he a relation?
No, not necessarily. It wasn't a relation per se. We just share the surname.
Okay. So, just reflecting on Edgar Lungu's legacy, we've just been speaking to Dr. Fred Member, who's been speaking about their friendships, but also their collegial relationship through not only the media fraternity, but speaking about the former president as a lawyer, how he was as a family man, as a friend, but also as a politician. How would you characterize him as a leader, as a person, and his presidency?
So thank you very, very much. And I should be quick to indicate that we as Zambians have once again lost a gallant leader. As you know, this is the fourth time that, the fifth time actually, that our country is losing gallant men. All of our 7 presidents, sorry for that, all of our 7 presidents, only one is alive. All the 6 are gone. Edgar Lungu happens to be the 6th president, and unfortunately we have lost him, the only surviving former head of state who we actually had as a country. Unfortunately, we have lost him. We have lost him at a time when he was highly needed. As you know that every leader in a country depends quite a lot on the former head of state for guidance here and there. So what it simply means is that Zambia now doesn't have any former head of state. That places the current head of state with a heavy burden. But to indicate here that Edgar Lungu was one of the very effective leaders that we had as a country, who ruled Zambia for 7 years. He was president from 2015 up to 2021. So he ruled Zambia for all that particular period, indicating that during that period there are quite a number of things. Let me be very quick to indicate that one of the issues that we remember Edgar Lungu for is the enactment of the current constitution that we have. You know, Zambia struggled for quite a long time to have a constitution. From 1996, it took 20 years struggling to have a constitution. During that period, we had President Lezi Mwanawasa, we had the President Rupia Bwezani-Banda, we had the President Michael Sata. All these presidents did what they could to have to make Zambia have a constitution. But it only took President Edgar Lungu, when he became president, that he gave the opportunity for Zambia to have a constitution that we are now using, which I should indicate that has got a number of progressive provisions. That is one of the things that we have to remember.
Mr. Lungu, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I'm not sure what's going on with the microphone that you are utilizing at the moment, but you seem to be off mic. So if I could just ask you to speak directly into the microphone of whatever device you're using to speak to us. I want to reflect on a very interesting thing with regards to former President Edgar Lungu and his presidency. As we mentioned, that it was marked by his ambitious infrastructure project, and a significant part of that involved the presence of the Chinese and investment from the Chinese, which was quite ironic given the fact that he took over from former President Michael Sata, who had a lot to say about this particular issue. If you could just talk to me about his thinking, his politics around that, and how it impacted on him in later years.
Yeah, thank you so very much. To talk about his presidency, indeed, when President Edgar Chagwa Lungu was president, he, as the former President Michael Chilufya Sata had done, continued from where Michael Sata had left in terms of infrastructure development. As you have rightly indicated, the relationship that Zambia has had with China was indeed good. At that time when President Edgar Lungu, because of his infrastructure development undertakings, he indeed had a good relationship with the Chinese government because of the support that the Chinese government was giving Zambia towards the infrastructure development. So indeed there was a very good relationship between Zambia and China during his reign, which relationship has actually continued. Even now, you have seen that even the current president has seen the need to continue with that working relationship with the Chinese government in terms of providing support to a number of developmental activities. So indeed, apart from what I indicated earlier, that in terms of governance, Edgar Lungu helped this country to have the current constitution that we are having. He also contributed greatly in terms of infrastructure development. He really was ambitious around that. If you came to Lusaka now, you are going to discover that Lusaka has a number of roads which were actually built during the reign of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu. And indeed, we have quite a number of projects that we can attribute to his reign as president. He made his own contributions, which us as Zambians actually remain indebted to him.
You know what was quite interesting, though, is that when I look at some of the criticisms against the current president, it has been about the role of the private sector and the type of trade agreements or pacts that are entered into that sometimes undermine the growth of Zambian nationals and are skewed towards, and I'll say the Chinese at this point, because I remember, by the way, many conversations with former President Michael Sata about the harm that this was doing to Zambians, particularly in Lusaka, where it's not skewed in favor of Zambians. So just looking back at all of this, the evolution of building of Zambia's economy and the understanding of the people, of the politics, of what has been going on, and the blame that has been apportioned to these presidents that I mentioned, including Levi Mwanawasa.
So thank you so very much. So I think you are aware that Zambia runs a mixed economic system in which quite a good number of our economic activities are private sector driven. We have to accept that particular fact. Or most of our economic activities are private sector driven. So most almost all of our presidents have actually tried by all means to make sure that there is so much involvement in terms of the private sector in our economic system. So if you look at the mining sector is private, is actually being run by the private sector. There is a private sector driven there. You look at the transport sector, you look at the communication sector, you look at the banking sector, financial systems, all these are driven by the private sector. So to be very honest with you, it is clear that economically speaking, Zambia depends so much on the private sector for its economic well-being, and as such, even the current government, I think you have seen that the emphasis is so much on the private sector. President Edgar Lungu, who actually has unfortunately left us, also took time to engage and work with the private sector. That's why you indicated that there was a lot of involvement of the Chinese government here and there, and a number of other private players in trying to improve the Zambia's economic system. So generally, the economic system has always been driven by the economic sector, the private sector.
The reason I ask this is because I want us to delve into the role of politics and the impact that it has on one's legacy. I mean, if we look at the 2020 debt default, which fell under the administration of former President Edgar Lungu, there was a great deal of criticism against him and the financial management of the country, and how he handled key relationships such as with the United States and the IMF. And as I say, I juxtapose it with what we're seeing now. So the current president has his detractors and has, of course, those who laud him. So was some of what was apportioned to Edgar Lungu as a blame fair?
Okay, so to be very honest with you, you are aware that when the Patriotic Front was leaving office in 2021, the debt burden that the country was facing was quite high. That is something that we all agree and we know. There was Zambia was highly indebted, and that is one of the reasons that you saw the current government trying to go around and look for ways of trying to have the debt restructured. So indeed, one of the areas of criticism around the governance of President Edgar Chagwa Lungu was the same issue around the mounting debt at that particular time, which the current government came to try and restructure. So this debt restructuring we're talking about, which the current government has embarked on, was actually as a result of not necessarily the abuse per se. We have to be very clear there. It was not that the government borrowed money for abuse, but that it went to a number of infrastructure development activities which actually needed to be worked on by the current regime. So we needed to be very quick to indicate that when the Patriotic Front borrowed, it would be very wrong for us to say that they borrowed for abuse. They didn't borrow for abuse. They borrowed to use the money into various activities, and indeed the debt mounted to an extent where the current regime had no option but to have it restructured in order to start on a note that will be manageable in terms of managing the economy. Let me be very quick here to indicate that the current government, if you look at the diplomatic relations that the current government has, is basically based so much on the economy. It's economic diplomacy more than political diplomacy. So there's a lot to deal with, to look at in terms of economic benefits that the country gains with regards to relations that it has with other different countries across the globe.
So in very brief terms, what then would you say would be the advice, given what you said, to President Hichilema's government on, and also looking at the role that GEARS can play as an initiative in achieving good governance while also striving for economic recovery and unity?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so very much. So what we would encourage the current government, looking at the fact that now we have lost the president, is to look at how best we can unite this particular country and continue moving forward. It is high time that any form of divisions that could exist that might have existed between the Patriotic Front, the former ruling party, and the current regime, the United Party for National Development. It's time now to look at how can we work together as a country. And let me take advantage of this particular interview to indicate that at a time like this, we need to put aside all the differences that we might have and look at how best we can build a country together, mourn the former president with dignity. But to answer your question in terms of what the current government from the previous president, it is to make sure that we find ways and means as a country to look at what is it that the Patriotic Front did and how can we build from what they left and we move forward as a country without looking at everything in negative terms.
Lex Nlungu, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time. Chairperson of the GEARS Initiative Zambia Advisory Council, he too also sharing his views, his thoughts, his experiences of former President Edgar Lungu, who passed away earlier today.
Stella Longwe, Pamalonje.
Palitusokoma pano pamalonje kumvera nyimbo za mu Africa kusangalala kupeza moyo akuti kumva moyo kuti kuyenda bwino pano pamalonje ndiyetu apa tili ndikatswiri oyimba ameneyu ndikatswiri wa dziko la Malawi amene akukhala mdziko la South Africa ndipo amayimba amene akuti ndi Big Nick Malawi. Yatusati kuti kodi moyo wanu woyimba ukuyenda bwanji mu Johannesburg?
Moyo woyimba ukuyenda bwino kwambiri chiliyonse chikuteka ndithu bwino.
Ayi aziwoneka yonse chikuteka mofa magrasi anu apa mwaka akuti kumenya yonse aziwoneka zoti azikuteka ndithu mu Johannesburg.
Malonje panthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe. Africa Update on Channel Africa.
Over 35 organizations are expected to converge at the Union Buildings in Pretoria over illegal immigrants in South Africa. They say South Africa is facing a myriad of challenges and that foreign nationals are worsening the situation. Yes, Khutato, just take us through the main aims of the march, what you're hoping to get from them.
So we are basically saying to the President of the Republic of South Africa, illegal immigration is a pandemic. Implement the laws. It's not that we don't have these laws. How many people are being human trafficked? How many people are being hijacked? Our schools are full. Our hospitals are full. And it's almost as if we're carrying the burdens of the entire Africa at the expense of South Africans. And we are basically saying enough is enough. We want the President of the Republic of South Africa to meet us at the Union Building. We've submitted letters to say that we are coming on this day. We want to meet with him there to give him this mandate because clearly he has failed citizens. He's failed South Africans by failing to implement the law. That's the most important thing. We are going to give you a mandate. We, the people, shall govern.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu on Channel Africa every weekday from 12 to 2 p.m. Africa World Hour. Africa World Hour. Unpacking global headlines from an African perspective.
25 minutes to 10 it is. We continue with the latest news in and around the continent and beyond, of course. So it's been 25 years since the Six-Day War in Kisangani Democratic Republic of Congo devastated the city and claimed hundreds of civilian lives. Despite clear evidence of serious crimes, no one has been brought to justice. For more on the ongoing struggle for accountability, truth and reparations for the victims of this forgotten conflict, we are joined now by Tegere Chaguta, Amnesty International's Regional Director for East and Southern Africa. A very good evening to you and thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us.
Good evening, Pepiso. Thank you for the invitation.
So we talk about accountability. Perhaps let's just take a step back and remind our listeners, our viewers, about exactly what happened at that time and who was seen to be responsible and if anything has changed now.
Thank you, Pepe. So the report we have launched today, titled, "Is Anyone Moved by Congo's Pain?" documents the denial of justice, truth, and the right to reparations for victims of the Six-Day War, which happened in the Eastern DRC city of Kisangani 25 years ago, when the Ugandan and Rwandan armies who were stationed in that city following the end of the First Congo War clashed against each other indiscriminately firing at densely populated areas, and as you said, killing hundreds and injuring thousands others. The report also documents the untold suffering that the victims of this war continue to suffer to today because of the denial of justice.
And as I say, who was understood to be behind it? Were there political machinations that were nefarious, that were at play? And if these armies were stationed there and the understanding was to, of course, protect civilians, how is it then that they ended up turning on the civilians?
The Ugandan and Rwandan armies were in the city of Kisangani following the end of the First Congo War, which you will recall ushered in Laurent Kabila and ousted Mobutu Sese Seko. Now, the two armies had been allies with Laurent Kabila's army at the time. Investigations have not been done into the circumstances around the war, so it is not possible right now to specifically specify who within the Rwandan and Ugandan armies was responsible for issuing commands. But what we know for certain is that it is these two armies that had been in that city that clashed on those fateful 6 days from the 5th of June to the 10th of June in the year 2000.
And the reason I mentioned this is part of what has seen this ongoing current conflict has been over disagreement over claims over land, the divide, the borders that we're seeing, and of course the mineral wealth that lies underneath, and who is seen as interfering with what. Could this be the reason why there has been a lack of judicial criminal proceedings that have been satisfactory?
Yes, it did. We see that due to the failure to investigate and prosecute, the impunity that we have seen in the Eastern DRC is what continues to embolden both foreign forces who are currently in the Eastern DRC, as well as members of the Congolese forces. And between the foreign forces and the Congolese forces, we know, as we have documented recently, the countless human rights violations, including allegations of mineral looting by these foreign forces, which has caused the ongoing, for the last 3 decades now, the ongoing humanitarian and human rights crisis in Eastern DRC.
And we've seen the ICJ try and play a role, but of course its jurisdiction has also been limited. So perhaps let's just go into that and document, if you will, for our viewers, for our listeners, the role that all three countries have played, particularly in the Frival Commission or Compensation Fund.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, the DRC brought a case against both Rwanda and Uganda to the International Court of Justice. Uganda made itself available for that trial, but Rwanda refused to present itself for the trial. The ICJ subsequently ruled that the Ugandan forces, or rather the government of Uganda, should pay reparations to the DRC to the tune of more than $300 million. Those reparations, or the monies from Uganda, have since been distributed, or the distribution of that started in 2024 and managed by this agency, Frival. Unfortunately, the distribution of the reparations have been marked by allegations of corruption, of marginalization of some communities in Kisangani, and as we stand today, a lot of people, a lot of victims of the war still remain without compensation, as the agency that is responsible continues to bungle, to embezzle, and to fail to deliver reparations that are due to the victims.
So how was it, how did the composition go about to allow for the manipulation of these funds?
The funds are managed by an agency which is set up by the which is set up by the government of Congo, the current government of Congo. These are government officials, these are civil servants, and what is clear is that there has not been adequate oversight on the implementation of the distribution of reparations. What we have seen is that last year, the whole management team of this agency was sacked, replaced by another set of officials. And as we speak today, very recently, the minister responsible for that agency has also come under investigation for alleged part of the corruption. So this is an agency of the government which unfortunately has not been managed and overseen effectively to be able to deliver on its mandate.
Right, and just finally, if you could just also reflect on those who were affected and afflicted by the war. You've published a briefing, Is Anyone Moved by Congo's Pain? 25 Years Without Justice for the Six-Day War in Kisangani. The people that have been interviewed, what are they saying? I know some of them are saying people are without shame. They've lost hope in humanity because of what's been going on. But I'm sure there are also physical scars that people are living with.
Absolutely. Our researchers met with over 50 people, and of those, more than 40 were victims of this war. These are people that are living with physical disability. These are people that continue to live with psychological trauma, people that continue to live with emotional scars. But over and above that, families were torn apart, breadwinners were lost. So we also have people that are currently living in very dire livelihood situations and have not been able to rebuild their lives since this war 25 years ago.
Thank you so much for your time. Tegere Chaguta, Amnesty International's Regional Director for East and Southern Africa, just speaking to us about the aftermath and lack of justice following the Kisangani war. Heartbreaking stuff indeed. It is just about 15 minutes to 10.
Africa at Play with NATO and ETO Chairman.
The Confederation of African Athletics, the CAA President, Mr. Hamad Kalkaba Malboum, talk to us about the state of athletics in Africa as it stands, and what picture are you looking at 5 years later?
Yeah, athletics in Africa is strong. We are able to organize our major events in time. Like this year, we will have the under-20 and under-18 African Championship in Nigeria. Next year, we will have the senior in Ghana. In 2027, we will go back to Algeria to organize the under-18 and under-20. And then 2028, we will have the senior championship in Gaborone in Botswana. Well, by this program, we can increase our performance. And at the same time, we are considering the fact that within the British Federation, they are identifying young talent every year within their national program, within the scholarship championship. And so the athletics in Africa is in good standard.
Live every Saturday and Sunday from 2 to 5 p.m. Central African Time. The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
Zukani, the Shy Guy, a Morning Switch.
Have you ever listened to a song and then it gives you goosebumps? Cause it takes you way back in the 80s. My goodness. Hey baby. You hear Yvonne Chaka Chaka there. I wanna talk to the DJ. And then the DJ goes like, hey baby, I've got you on the other side. Huh? There were no WhatsApps then, right? There were no sliding in the TMs at the time. Oh man.
Your weekend mornings are activated with the Shy Guy on the Morning Switch. At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Sepiso Makwetla.
Channel Africa.
And it's just gone 13 minutes to 10. A pressing issue, this one, it is indeed. We talk about World Environment Day today. The spotlight is on plastics pollution, one of the biggest threats, not only to our health, but the planet as well. Plastic waste, especially that of microplastics, now contaminates water, air and food, putting biodiversity and climate resilience at risk. Nods Odedzi is Climate Engagement Coordinator at Doctors Without Borders and joins us to speak about how plastic pollution impacts public health and vulnerable communities. A very good evening to you, Nell, and thank you so much for speaking to us.
Thank you so much for having me, Tepiso.
I was just thinking, are there still people who are still wondering about whether or not plastic is a danger to the planet, to our environment, and even to food security, because it also impacts marine life, that also then ricochets back into our ability to put food on the table and eat that food?
I think, yeah, definitely. There are still people that may not think that plastic pollution is a big issue. But really, I think ending plastic pollution is this theme for World Environment Day is really highlighting a crisis that stretches across the world, and really, like you've already said, it impacts the environment, it impacts it's climate related as well as impacting our health. So really, plastic pollution is more than just a plastic litter issue. It's a triple threat, and I guess with the increased use of single-use plastic items and really low recycling as well that we have globally, and not just in South Africa. I think there are definitely a lot of people that might not think or see the urgency of plastic pollution.
And you know, I'll be completely honest here, albeit to my own embarrassment, because I'm obviously revealing the flaws in me. But one of the things I know used to drive me crazy is these, these guys who are pushing these carts on the road, and sometimes you're driving at night and you can't even see them, and you've almost hit one or two of them. But you know, one of the things that reminded me is that they are here to help us recycle the waste that a lot of us don't even think of doing. And while they're doing it out of necessity, it is going a long way towards fixing this problem. So speak to us about how much we have gained steam, how much we have improved, how much better are people conscientized about this, the dangers of plastic.
You're right. Waste collectors or waste pickers play such a huge role in our society in terms of collecting different waste products, and not just plastics. They collect it, they sort it, and they recycle. And this ensures that certain plastic products and other waste products don't get to landfill. But I think, to be honest, we might not really recognize the huge role that they are playing. And I think also with how, you may have noticed, and this is something that's a practice that is very common. We usually take out our bins on certain days every week, and we really just leave them out there for our waste. And our garbage to be collected, right? And these waste pickers then come and they sort it and they take the materials that can be recycled. So I think maybe there actually isn't enough education and awareness of the role that waste pickers play in recycling plastics, and how we can, what role we can play as well as consumers, as communities, to sort our waste, to ensure that when a waste picker comes past your house, your community, certain waste is already sorted for them, and I think that would make it a lot easier. So I think there definitely needs to be more awareness and education around proper sorting, number one, but also proper recycling.
Okay, so we'll get into the legislative, regulatory stuff in a moment, but let's just do our part and do that now. So how do we divvy up our trash in such a way that it doesn't feel like a chore? So is it plastics together, paper and paper on the side? How should people be doing this? Do you need like 4 different types of dispensers or disposal bins to sort out through your trash?
I think if you're able to get different types of disposal bins that are for different waste products, that would be great. But in a lot of poor and marginalized communities, that's not possible, because even just waste collection and proper waste management systems don't exist. But I think it's starting with sorting and just sort of understanding the different types of waste, right? There's plastics, there's paper, there's glass, and there's organic waste as well. And I think even if it means, having a certain container or setting aside plastics, the plastic products out of our waste, and setting that aside out of the bins already, so that it's easier for waste pickers to collect. And perhaps also not putting organic waste, for example, into our garbage bins. Those can be used as compost, for example. So I think those are sort of the smaller, simpler steps that can be done.
So just looking back to when the UN Treaty of Ending Plastic Pollution was adopted, I think that's Resolution 514, am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So since then, what has happened? Where are we as a country? Where are we as a continent?
Mm-hmm. So I think one of the biggest developments globally, and what is being negotiated, is a global plastics treaty. Negotiations have kind of stalled since December 2024, but negotiations are going to resume in August this year. And really, this is a treaty. If it is passed successfully, it would be the first sort of legally binding agreement or instrument that could see a huge reduction in plastic pollution, and really because it would, number one, call for, a reduction in the production of new plastic products. For example, it would call for a ban or better regulation of the chemicals that are added into plastic products. So yeah, this global plastics treaty would be for plastic pollution what the Paris Agreement is for climate change.
So there are different models, and I know there's also a different context for countries, whereas there's a bickering continuing about greenhouse gas emissions. So Africa as a continent, where are we in terms of what is being described as take, make, waste model?
In terms of greenhouse gas emissions, obviously, I think that's sort of disproportionate, and I think maybe linking it, especially with plastic pollution. Plastics are made out of, most plastics, about 99% of them are made out of oil and gas, and from really their production, from the extraction of the oil and gas to their transportation to their production all the way to their disposal, they really do impact the climate, and so they play a huge role in terms of climate change, or impacting climate change, or driving climate change rather. And as African countries, we are obviously feeling the impacts of climate change, and but we are not the ones that are the most responsible, because we are not the biggest emitters of fossil fuel gases. And yeah, so I think that's sort of the other angle of plastic pollution. It's not just how it impacts the environment and human health, but also how it drives climate change.
And it's indigenous peoples that are mostly affected by irresponsible plastic disposal, isn't it?
That's correct. It's indigenous people, it's vulnerable communities, it's the poorest really communities, because it's in these communities that you find that there's a lack of proper waste management systems, like I had mentioned. There is also maybe less knowledge around recycling, but I think also knowledge and awareness is only the first step, right? There needs to be sort of systems in place that can allow communities to be able to even recycle. So a lot of the time there are no recycling stations even near communities, so which acts as a barrier really to better practices when it comes to pollution.
A quick word on how plastic can be our friends. A lot of businesses, a lot of entrepreneurs are finding ways of coming up with creative products that can actually become monetary or sources of money in taking plastic and making it useful or attractive.
So I think plastics can become our friends when we don't use them for just single use. When we see, I think, the potential in how they can become other useful products in our homes, and this makes me think of a community-based organization based in Rustenburg that MSF has partnered with over the past year. And they're called Pepperfatso. And Pepperfatso, one of their programs is a recycling and upcycling program where they collect different waste products, including plastic products, and create different items out of them. And some of the items that they've created are vases, for example, for reuse in the home, pencil, or stationery holders that you can use again. So really, that is to empower communities and show them that you are able to reuse plastics and to really encourage that practice of reusing plastics. But also, like you've mentioned, it can become a source of income.
No, thank you very much. No, so the Climate Engagement Coordinator at Doctors Without Borders. It's time now for Hotlines with Shayla and Kumana.
Hotlines bring you fresh perspectives about love after dark. With Shayla